أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير آمين يا رب العالمين.
Let us recap the status of ism or i'rab of ism. I'rab or the status of ism represent changes that occur at the end of the ism. When we think of the four characteristics of ism, for gender, we should think masculine or feminine. For number, we should think singular, dual, or plural. For capacity, we should think definite or indefinite. And for status, we should think about the three forms of ism that are rafa, nasab, and jar. An ism in the first form is called marfu, ism in the second form is called mansoob, and ism in the third form is called majroor. The status of a singular ism, whether that's masculine or feminine, is identified by the presence of double pesh or double dhamma, double zabar or double fatha, or double zair or double kasra on the last alphabet of that ism. Double pesh on the last alphabet of a singular ism indicates the rafa status. Double zabar on the last alphabet of a singular ism indicates nasab status, and double zair on the last alphabet of a singular ism indicates jar status. A specific note for nasab that after double zabar, we need to write an alif at the end of the ism. The exception is if the ism ends with a gol ta, or if the ism ends with alif and hamza together, then we don't need to add an alif at the end of an ism after double zabar. Please note that when identifying the status of any ism, we should not only be thinking of harakat at the end of the ism. Relying on this method can be misleading. There are other ways for us to identify the status of the ism, and inshallah, we will be studying them in this lecture. We can do some practice of the status of singular asma. The first example is that of the ism jaza. Jaza means reward or compensation. Ism jaza will have four characteristics. From the standpoint of gender, jaza is masculine. It is masculine because it does not meet criteria for it to be feminine. Ism jaza is singular in number. Ism jaza is indefinite or nakra because it does not meet criteria for the different types of definite asma that we studied. And from the standpoint of status, ism jaza, because it is singular and masculine, it will be on the pattern of jaza'un, jaza'an, and jaza'in. Please note that in the nasab status, we do not need to add an alif at the end of jaza'an because alif and hamza are together at the end of jaza. So in the ism jaza, alif and hamza come together at the end. Therefore, in jaza'an, we do not need to add an alif after the word. The next example is of ism juz. Juz means part. Ism juz is singular and masculine. And because it is singular and masculine, the status of ism juz will be on the pattern of juz'un, juz'an, and juz'in. Here, in the nasab status, we will have to add an alif at the end of juz'an because hamza is there but there is no alif. So alif and hamza are not together at the end of juz. So for juz'an, we need to write an alif at the end. The next example is Muslim. Muslim ism is also singular and masculine. So the status of Muslim will be on the pattern of Muslimun, Musliman, and Muslimin. The next example is dua. Dua ism is also singular and masculine, so the status of ism dua will be on the pattern of dua'un, dua'an, and dua'in. For dua'an, in the nasab status, we do not need to add an alif at the end because alif and hamza are coming together at the end of dua. The next example is su, which means evil or bad. Ism su is also singular and masculine, so the status of su will be on the pattern of su'un, su'an, and su'in. In su'an, we need to add an alif, as alif and hamza are not together at the end of su. Finally, we have the ism muslima, which is singular and feminine, and because muslima is a singular and feminine ism, the pattern of muslima will be on the pattern of muslimatun, muslimatan, and muslimatin. So overall, for all these singular asma, whether they are masculine or feminine, they will end on the same pattern in their three forms of status. We will use this table to summarize the status of different asma that we learn about. For a singular ism or wahid ism that is masculine or feminine, the status of that ism will be on the pattern of double pesh at the end of the ism for rafa, double zabar at the end of the ism for nasab, and double zair at the end of the ism for jar. For example, for a singular masculine ism like Muslim, the status will be Muslimun, Musliman, or Muslimin. And for a singular feminine ism such as Muslima, the three forms of its status will be Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. Now that we have studied the status of singular asma, in the current lecture, we will focus on studying the status of dual ism. We will study the status of non-broken plural ism and the status of broken plural ism. To summarize dual ism is also called musanna ism. Dual asma will end in the ani and aini sounds. The ending sound applies to both masculine and feminine asma. Let us look at the example of the singular masculine ism Saleh. Saleh means one pious boy or one pious man. And the dual form of Saleh will be either Salehani or Salehaini. Salehani means two pious boys or two pious men. Salehaini means two pious boys or two pious men. Salehani ends in the ani sound. Salehaini ends in the aini sound. For the feminine example, we have Saleha, which means one pious girl or woman. And the dual form of Saleha will be Salehatani or Salehataini. Salehatani means two pious girls or two pious women. Salehataini means two pious girls or two pious women. Salehatani and Salehataini also have the ending sounds ani and aini. Both Salehani and Salehaini and Salehatani and Salehataini have the same meaning. There is a reason why the different forms of the dual ism have the same meaning. Salehani and Salehaini represent the dual form of ism Saleh. Salehani means two pious boys or two pious men. Salehaini means two pious boys or two pious men. So what is the difference between Salehani and Salehaini if they both mean the same? Salehani, which ends in the ani sound, represents the rafa status of ism, or ism in its first form. Salihani is marfu. Salihaini, which ends in the aini sound, represents the nasab status of ism or ism in its second form. Salihaini is mansoob. Salihaini can also represent the jar status of ism or ism in its third form. Salihaini can be majroor. So the difference between salihani and salihaini is that salihani represents the rafa status of ism and salihaini can represent the nasab or the jar status of ism. Moving to the feminine example, we have salihatani and salihataini. Salihatani and salihataini are dual versions of ism saliha. Salihatani means two pious girls or two pious women. Salihataini means two pious girls or two pious women. The difference between salihatani and salihataini is that salihatani, which ends in the ani sound, represents the rafa status of ism or ism in its first form. Therefore, salihatani is marfu. Salihataini, which ends in the aini sound, can represent the nasab status of ism or ism in its second form, in which case salihataini will be mansoob, or salihataini can also represent the jar status of ism or ism in its third form, where salihataini will be majroor. So the difference between salihatani and salihataini is that salihatani represents the rafa status of ism and salihataini represents the nasab or the jar status of ism. We should note that in all of these examples, the ism has its finishing touch at the end. For example, in salihani, towards the end, the finishing has already been done. We do not need to add anything else. Similarly, for salihaini, the finishing touch has been added to the end and we don't need to add anything else. Same goes for salihatani and for salihataini. Here we are using ending sounds to identify the status of an ism. Previously, we used the presence of double pesh, double zabar, double zair at the end of an ism to identify the status of that ism. But that is not the case here because we are using ending sounds such as ani and aini. Therefore, we do not have to always rely on harakat at the end of an ism to identify the status of an ism. We will do practice of the status of dual asma. The first word that we have is kitab. Kitab is singular and the status of the dual version of kitab will be kitabani, kitabaini, kitabaini. Kitabani represents the rafa status, kitabaini represents the nasab status, and kitabaini also represents the jar status. Please note that both kitabani and kitabaini have the same meaning, that is, two books. But kitabani and kitabaini differ in terms of the status. Next, Muslim. And for Muslim, the dual versions will be Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini. Mu'min, Mu'minani, Mu'minaini, Mu'minaini. Munafiq, Munafiqani, Munafiqaini, Munafiqaini. Mushrik, Mushrikani, Mushrikaini, Mushrikaini. Jannah, Jannatani, Jannataini, Jannataini. Muslima, Muslimatani, Muslimataini, Muslimataini. Kafira, Kafiratani, Kafirataini, Kafirataini. Dar, Darani, Daraini, Daraini. We will return to our table for the status of ism. For a singular ism, both masculine and feminine, the three forms of the ism will be identified by the presence of double pesh, double zabar, or double zair at the end of the ism. For example, for the singular masculine ism Muslim, the three forms will be Muslimun, Musliman, and Muslimin. Muslimun represents the Rafa status, Musliman represents the Nasab status, and Muslimin represents Jar status. For a singular feminine ism like Muslima, the three forms of its status will be Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. We next studied dual asma or musanna asma. We studied that dual or musanna asma will be identified by the presence of the ani or aini ending sounds. And the ani or aini ending sounds will also be used to identify the status of dual or musanna asma. For the masculine ism Muslim, the three forms of its dual version will be Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini. Muslimani represents Rafa status, Muslimaini represents Nasab status, Muslimaini represents Jar status. For the feminine ism Muslima, the three forms of its dual version will be Muslimatani, Muslimataini, Muslimataini. Muslimatani represents Rafa status, Muslimataini represents Nasab status, and Muslimataini represents Jar status. Next, we will study the status of plural asma. We will study the status of non-broken plural, and we will study the status of broken plural. First, we will study the status of non-broken plural asma. Non-broken plural asma are also called Jama Salim asma. We studied that a different formula will be used to make masculine non-broken plural and feminine non-broken plural. Non-broken plural are identified based on their ending sound. For example, for masculine non-broken plural, they will end in the una or ina sounds. We will look at the example of ism Muslim. Muslim is a singular ism which is masculine, and the non-broken plural version of Muslim will be Muslimuna or Muslimina. From the standpoint of status, it is important to note that una ending sound represents Rafa status for masculine non-broken plural, and ina ending sound represents Nasab or Jar status for masculine non-broken plural. So for the ism Muslim, the non-broken plural versions will be Muslimuna or Muslimina. Muslimuna represents Rafa status, Muslimina represents Nasab or Jar status. For a non-broken plural masculine ism, una represents Rafa status and the ending sound ina represents Nasab or Jar status. Please note that both Muslimuna and Muslimina have their finishing touch at the end of the ism, meaning that both Muslimuna and Muslimina are completed at the end. There is nothing else that we need to add at the end of these two asma. So in the case of masculine non-broken plural, the finishing touch to the ism is based on ending sound, and the ending sound will be una or ina ending sounds. In this table, we will do practice of the status of masculine non-broken plural asma. The first example is of the ism Muslim. The three forms of masculine non-broken plural for Muslim will be Muslimuna, Muslimina, and Muslimina. Muslimuna represents the Rafa status, Muslimina represents Nasab status, and Muslimina represents Jar status. Una sound represents Rafa status, ina ending sound represents Nasab status, and ina ending sound represents Jar status. Mu'min, Mu'minuna, Mu'minina, مؤمنين. منافق منافقون منافقين منافقين. مشرك مشركون مشركين مشركين. In all these examples, una and ina ending sounds, they all have the same meaning, but they differ with regards to their status. Una ending sound will represent rafa status, and ina ending sound will represent nasab or jar status. We will return to our table of the status of ism. For singular asma, both masculine and feminine, the three forms of the ism will be on the pattern of Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin, Muslimatun, Muslimatan, Muslimatin. For dual or musanna asma, for both masculine and feminine, the status will be based on the ending sound. So, we will have the three forms of ism as Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini, Muslimatani, Muslimataini, Muslimataini. Ani will represent rafa status, Aini will represent nasab or jar status. For non-broken plural, for masculine ism, again we will be using ending sounds to identify the status of the ism. We will have the status of the ism on the pattern of Muslimuna, Muslimina, Muslimina. Ending sound una will represent rafa status, and ending sound ina will represent nasab or jar status. We will continue with our study of the status of plural asma. We started our study of the status of non-broken plural asma. We studied the status of masculine non-broken plural, and we reached the conclusion that masculine non-broken plural will be identified by the ending sounds una and ina. Una will represent the rafa status, and the ina ending sound will represent nasab or jar status. We will now study feminine non-broken plural. Previously, we studied that feminine non-broken plural end in the at sounds. For example, Muslimat and Salihat. Muslimat is the plural version of Muslima, and Salihat is the plural version of Saliha. If we notice, both these asma do not have their finishing touch at the end. Muslimat does not have its finishing touch. Salihat does not have its finishing touch. Both asma are not fully defined towards the end of the ism. Feminine non-broken plural asma will end in two forms, Muslimatun and Muslimatin, Salihatun and Salihatin. So if you compare Muslimatun to Muslimat, Muslimatun has its finishing touch. Similarly, Muslimatin has its finishing touch as compared to Muslimat. Same goes for Salihatun and Salihatin. All of these asma have their finishing touch at the end of the ism. So we have two ending sounds, atun and atin. To summarize, for feminine non-broken plural, we will have two ending sounds, Muslimatun and Muslimatin. Muslima is the singular ism which is feminine, and the two forms of its non-broken plural will be Muslimatun and Muslimatin. Atun ending sound represents the rafa status for feminine non-broken plural, and atin ending sound represents nasab or jar status for feminine non-broken plural. So just like masculine non-broken plural, in feminine non-broken plural, we also need to focus on the ending sound. In masculine non-broken plural, we had the una and ina sounds, and in feminine non-broken plural, we have atun, and atin ending sounds. Let us look at some examples of status of feminine non-broken plural. Jannah is a singular feminine ism, and the three versions of its feminine non-broken plural will be Jannatun, Jannatin, and Jannatin. Jannatun represents Rafa status, Jannatin represents Nasab status, and Jannatin represents Jar status. Atun represents Rafa status, Atin ending sound represents Nasab status, and Atin ending sound represents Jar status. Next, we have Muslimatun, Muslimatin, Muslimatin. Kafiratun, Kafiratin, Kafiratin. Talibatun, Talibatin, Talibatin. Please note that in all these examples, we are not focusing on the harakat at the end of the ism. We are not focusing on double pesh and double zair at the end of the ism, but we are rather focusing on the ending sound. So whenever we come across the ending sound atun, such as jannatun, or atin, such as jannatin, we should be thinking of feminine non-broken plural and the different forms of the status of feminine non-broken plural. To summarize the status of ism or the three forms of ism, for a singular ism, both masculine and feminine, the three forms will be identified by the presence of double pesh, double zabar, or double zair on the last alphabet of the ism. For rafa, we will look for double pesh. For nasab, we will look for double zabar, and for jar, we will look for double zair. For Muslim, we have Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. For Muslima, we have Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. For a dual ism or musanna ism, the status will be identified using the ani or aini ending sound. Rafa status will be identified by the ani ending sound, such as Muslimani or Muslimatani. Nasab status will be identified by the aini ending sound, such as Muslimaini or Muslimataini. And jar status will be identified by the aini ending sound as well, such as Muslimaini or Muslimataini. For non-broken plural, which is masculine, we will look for the una and ina ending sound, such as Muslimuna, which will correlate with the rafa status, and Muslimina, which is for nasab status, and Muslimina, which is also for jar status. So una ending sound will indicate rafa status, ina ending sound will indicate nasab status, and ina ending sound will also indicate jar status. For non-broken plural, that is feminine, we will look for the ending sound atun and atin. Atun ending sound, such as Muslimatun, will indicate rafa status, and atin ending sound, such as Muslimatin, will indicate nasab or jar status. We will now move to the study of status of broken plural asma. As we studied previously, broken plural asma are not made according to a formula. Non-broken plural asma are made according to a formula, and that is why we have ending sounds to help us identify the ism status, such as una, ina, atun, atin. The ending sound rule does not apply to broken plural asma. The three forms of broken plural asma follow the same pattern as that of a singular ism. So for a singular ism, we use double pesh or double dhamma, double zabar or double fatha, double zair or double kasra at the end of the ism to identify the status of that ism. The same rule also applies to broken plural asma. Let us look at a couple of examples. We have the ism Muslim, which is singular and masculine. The three forms of Muslim are Muslimun, Musliman, and Muslimin. Muslimun has double pesh on the last ism, Musliman has double zabar, and Muslimin has double zair on the last ism. Now let us look at an example of a broken plural. We have the example of abwab. Abwab is the plural of bab. Bab means one door and abwab means more than two doors. So the three forms of abwab that we have are abwabun, abwaban, and abwabin. Abwabun is on the same pattern as Muslimun. Abwaban is on the same pattern as Musliman. Abwabin is on the same pattern as Muslimin. Abwabun represents Rafa status. Abwaban represents Nasab status. Abwabin represents Jar status. Please also note that Abwaban is also written in the same pattern as Musliman, meaning the rule to add alif at the end of a nasab status after double zabar applies the same way to broken plural asma as it does to singular asma. We will now study some more examples. Here are some examples of masculine broken plural, and they will occur on the same pattern as that of singular masculine ism. For example, Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. This is an example of the status of a singular ism Muslim. The first example that we have is aqlam. Aqlam is the plural of qalam. The three forms of plural of qalam will be aqlamun, aqlaman, and aqlamin. Aqlamun is the same pattern as Muslimun. Aqlaman is the same pattern as Musliman, and aqlamin is on the same pattern as Muslimin. The next example is the plural of shajar. Shajar means tree, and the plural is ashjar. So the three forms of the broken plural of tree will be ashjarun, ashjaran, ashjarin. Aqlamun, aqlaman, aqlamin, ashjarun, ashjaran, ashjarin. The next example is that of qulub. Qalb means heart. The pattern we have is qulubun, quluban, qulubin. So in all these examples, the three forms of the broken plural ism are on the same pattern as the three forms of a singular ism. Like masculine broken plural, the three forms of the status of feminine broken plural will also be on the same pattern as that of singular asma. That is, by identifying the double pesh, double zabar, or double zair at the end of the ism. Ism Muslima is an example of a singular feminine ism, and the three forms of its status are Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. An example of feminine broken plural is the word Nisa. Nisa means women, and the three forms of the status of Nisa are Nisa'un, Nisa'an, and Nisa'in. Nisa'un is on the same pattern as Muslimatun, Nisa'an is on the same pattern as Muslimatan, and Nisa'in is on the same pattern as Muslimatin. We have now completed our table for the status of ism. For singular asma, we will identify them by the presence of double pesh, double zabar, or double zair at the end of the ism. So we have Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin, Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. Dual or musanna asma status will be identified using ani and aini ending sound. Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini, Muslimatani, Muslimataini, Muslimataini. Non-broken plural masculine will be identified using ending sound una or ina, such as Muslimuna, Muslimina, Muslimina. And non-broken plural, which is feminine, will be identified using the ending sound atun or atin. For example, Muslimatun, Muslimatin, muslimatin. For broken plural, both masculine and feminine, their status will be identified on the same pattern as that of singular asma, that is, by the identification of double pesh, double zabar, or double zair on the last alphabet of the ism. For example, aqlamun, aqlaman, aqlamin, nisa'un, nisa'an, nisa'in. We can try to summarize the status of ism on our fingertips. The pattern for singular ism, both masculine and feminine, and the pattern for broken plural, both masculine and feminine, will be the same. That is, at the end of the ism, we look for double pesh, double zabar, or double zair, both in singular asma and in broken plural asma. For dual asma, we will try to look for ani or aini ending sound. Ani will represent rafa status and aini will represent nasab or jar status. For non-broken plural, that is masculine, we look for the una or ina ending sound. Una will represent rafa status and ina will represent nasab or jar status. And finally, for non-broken plural feminine, we will look for atun or atin ending sounds. Atun will represent rafa status and atin ending sound will represent nasab or jar status. All in all, we will categorize the status of ism into these 5 groups. Let us look at some examples from the Holy Quran. Surah number 90, ayah number 8 mentions Ainaini. Ainaini is giving us several clues about its 4 characteristics. The biggest clue is the ending sound Aini. We know that the ending sounds Ani and Aini are used for dual asma. So, Ainaini must be dual. The translation of the ayah is as follows. Have we not given them 2 eyes? So, Ainaini means 2 eyes. Ainaini's status will also be determined by the ending sound. We know that Ani ending sound is used for rafa status and Aini ending sound is used for nasab or jar status. So the status of Ainaini will be nasab or jar. To summarize, Ainaini is a dual ism. It is nasab or jar in status. It is feminine in gender, as names of body parts that occur in pairs are grammatically feminine, and it is indefinite or nakra, as it does not meet criteria for it to be a definite ism. In the next ayah, we have the word lisanan. Lisanan has a double zabar at the end of the ism followed by an alif. This could mean 2 things from the standpoint of status. Lisanan is either a singular ism or it is a broken plural. Lisan means tongue, and its 3 forms will be lisanun, lisanan, and lisanin. Lisan is a singular ism, and that is clear in the translation as well, which is as follows: a tongue and 2 lips. So, to summarize lisanan, the gender is masculine because it is not referring to a body part that occurs in pairs. The number is singular, it is indefinite in capacity, and the status is nasab because of the presence of double zabar on the last alphabet followed by an alif. Next we have shafataini. Similar to ainaini, shafataini also ends with the aini sound. So we automatically know that it's referring to a dual ism, and it is translated as 2 lips. The summary of shafataini will be very similar to ainaini in that it is feminine in gender because it is referring to a body part that occurs in pair. The number is dual because of aini ending sound. The capacity is indefinite because it does not meet criteria for it to be a definite ism, and the status is nasab or jar because of the aini ending sound. Another example from the Holy Quran in Surah 63 Ayah 1, we have Al-Munafiquna. Munafiquna is giving us the biggest clue of una ending sound. We know that the una ending sound is used for masculine non-broken plural, and from the standpoint of status, it signifies the rafa status. So for al-munafiquna, the gender is masculine, the number is plural because masculine non-broken plural will have the una ending sound. Capacity is definite because of the presence of al at the beginning of the ism, and the status is rafa because of the una ending sound. Moving forward, we have al-munafiqina. As opposed to munafiquna, we have munafiqina. We know that una and ina ending sounds are used for masculine non-broken plural. So the number of al-munafiqina is plural because it is used for masculine non-broken plural, identified through the ina ending sound. The gender is masculine. The capacity is definite because of the presence of al at the beginning of the ism, and the status is nasab or jar because of the ina ending sound. Please note that al-munafiquna translation is the hypocrites in the ayah, and later in the ayah al-munafiqina is also translated as the hypocrites. So both terms have the same meaning, but they are written differently and pronounced differently because of the difference in the status. Al-munafiquna is rafa in status and al-munafiqina is nasab or jar in status. Finally, we have kazibuna. Kazibuna once again has the una ending sound, so the status will be on the same pattern as munafiquna. So the gender is masculine. Number is plural because of the una ending sound. It signifies a masculine non-broken plural. Its capacity is indefinite because we no longer have the al at the beginning of the ism. And the status is rafa because of the una ending sound. Kazibuna is referring to liars.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.